On this video, we're taking a trip back in time to take a retrospective look at the top 10 of 2019. Tastes change over time, different games get played, and lists can chop and change as time goes on. So after a year, how does the 2019 top 10 fare? Has it changed a great deal? Let's wait and see. Hello, I'm Luke Hector from the Broken Meeple, and if this is your first time checking out the channel, particularly a top 10 list, then check out the rest of my video content and have a look for more reviews, top 10 lists, solo plays, you name it, I've done it. If it takes your fancy and I've earned your subscription, please consider doing so. It would be a great Christmas present for me. And if any of the games on this list take your fancy, then whenever possible, try acquiring them from zatu.co.uk, where you can use my code at the bottom of the screen and in the description to get 5% discount off your entire basket of games. You probably haven't got time to do it before Christmas, but in the new year, we still want to buy more games and you've got that Christmas money handy, so consider filling up a gap on your shelf today. So it's no secret to anybody that 2020 kind of sucked. As a year in general. We all want to take it, and like to kick it out into the trash. For me, 2020 also wasn't the best year for games. 2019, I think, did a better job overall, even though I must admit, when I first did this list, I didn't think it had. I played a few more games since then and thought, oh, you know what, 2019 wasn't as bad as I thought. But what I like to do with these top 10s now is take a retrospective look back. These lists are ones that I particularly quite enjoy because I like to look back and see how tastes have changed as time has gone on. There's also the thing that it's just physically impossible to play every game from a year. Seriously, anybody who dares say that when you're doing a top 10 list you simply haven't played all the games from that year, well, guess what, mate? Neither have you. The Dice Tower can't even manage it, so how do you think I'm going to manage it? But, the idea is that you do a top 10 list at the end of that year, and then a year later, I do the list again to see whether the list has updated. Maybe games have got better or worse, or perhaps I've played some newer games since that are like, oh yeah, if I had played this in time before, that would have gone on the list. So it's not to invalidate the previous list, that's still valid, but it's just to say, after a year, after some more plays of 2019 games, has the list changed dramatically? Has some fallen off? Have some new ones come on? Well, that's what I'm here to talk about today. Now, I should stipulate before I get onto this number 10 that I do not look back at the positions of my previous list before making this one, because that would just skew the figures too much. It would be prone to bias. But I will mention where they featured on the list before. This was my number 9, it is now dropped down to number 10, and it's this tiny little game here called Abyss Conspiracy. Yeah, a tiny little filler game is still worthy of my top 10 of the year, because it's a solid filler game all through and through. Everybody knows I love Abyss. This is like top 10 game for me. Love it, love it, love it. With its cool fishy theme and the light mechanics and the expansions. Oh, they made it so good. This is a filler game based on that same universe. So artwork wise, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
You good looking.
But with this, it's just a really cool, simple game where you're building up a pyramid setup of these different lords of different colors. And the idea is that you're trying to collect points, but you're trying to arrange this pyramid in such a way that colors will match, or certain abilities will key off, or you'll be able to unlock locations. So it borrows some elements from the main game. But what I like about it is this concept that when you're drawing cards to view, it's very much a case of you can draw as many as you feel like up to a point, but the more that you pick up, the more you have to place face up for other players to be able to take. So you're kind of thinking, well, what do I desperately need to find? Am I not too fussed? Well, maybe I'll just draw one card and hope I get something half decent. But then you'll be like, well, okay, I'll draw 3 cards. But then I only get to pick 1. The other 2 I've got to be like, oh, I've got to lay them down for people. And then you'll look at them and go, I'd like that purple, but I can't let player 2 get the red. Maybe I should take the red now. Is that going to hurt me a bit? I suppose I need a red eventually. Decisions like that is what makes this really cool. But it's super fast and super quick. Really easy to teach. It's not a difficult game at all. I sat down at Essen, I believe, with like a French guy from Bombix, and literally, despite it not being his first language, he taught it to me and we played it in less than 20 minutes as a 2-player game. From literally being completely blind to the game and being taught by someone where English was not their first language. That's how simple this game is. But I still really enjoy it. It looks gorgeous. It's just an interesting filler game that, like I say, doesn't necessarily revolutionize filler games, but whenever I'm thinking, I need something to kill 20 to 30 minutes of play, particularly if there's only 2 or 3 of us, so I'll pull this one out because it's a pretty solid game. It was my number 9, it's my number 10, Big Whoop, Abyss Conspiracy. My number 9 didn't even make the list last year. Yeah, I had not played this, I don't think. Maybe I'd played it once, maybe, by the time the year ended, but not enough to give it a full review and, like, actually, well, I didn't give it a full review, but, you know, give it the beans and really see how it's gone. But Runestones has been a surprise hit for me. It started off being kind of like a 7 out of 10. I thought, yeah, this is pretty good. I need to give it more plays though. Then it quickly bumped up to 8. And now it pretty much is a solid 8, possibly even teetering towards a 9 out of 10. It's like really solid game. And it just surprised me on how elegant this is. So simple. It's a deck builder. You are literally just trying to collect different color gems in order to turn them into different color artifacts to collect sets so you can trade them in for points. Here's the cool twist though. Firstly, before I get to the twist, it's so simple and elegant, like I can teach this in about 5 to 10 minutes and we can get going. It's just so buttery smooth, which is welcome in an age where we're used to 3-hour complex, ridiculously finicky games. But the twist here is that, firstly, when you convert these artifacts into sets, you get a cool power-up ability that you use for the rest of the game. But you get less points if you do too few in the set. So you've got to decide whether you're going to go through the game doing big sets for lots of points but less abilities, or vice versa, where you do it for cheap sets, less points, but all this cool power-ups that you get. On top of that, I love the idea that when you play the cards, which are multi-use, love it, you buy cards with them or you play them, you have to play 2 cards, and the lower value card is taken out of your deck, potentially out of the whole game even. So you've got to consider, I really like these 2 cards and it's working, but then I'm going to lose that card because it's the higher value. Oh, I don't know if I want to lose that one. Maybe I should play this card instead, because then that one will go away and I can hang on to this one. Might not be the best turn ever, but at least I get to keep the card. Decisions like that, you know, not overly brain burning. I mean, it doesn't take you long to figure out what your next turn is. So, you know, turns are very quick. But I just thought that was a really neat twist on the deck building mechanic, which, like I say, could use a little bit of innovation here and there. It just surprised me, and particularly from Queen Games, I don't tend to go for a lot of their stuff. They do a lot of decent enough Euros, they're just usually quite dry and meh for me. This one I was thinking, I don't know, it looks pretty, but is it really going to entice me? I don't know, but a friend of mine recommended it, and even though we don't tend to gel very much on game tastes, this was one where I'm like, you know what? You were right. This is a really cool deck builder Euro game. My number 9 should have made the list if I'd done it before, but oh well, like I say, it's here now. My number 8 was my number 6. This is dropping a little bit for me, hence it has fallen down the charts, mainly because there have been instances of 1 or 2 slightly overpowered strategies in it, which I might need to consider house ruling. But other than that, Predaporter is a fantastic thematic economic game. What?
I don't think any of us expected him to say that.
What, Luke? An economic game? How could you possibly like these things? You hate economic games. Granted, most economic games I do hate. You know, I'm an accountant in real life, and it's not the most fun job in the world, it's just secure and pays well. But this one is a heavy economic game that I can get behind and say, other than 1 or 2 little house rules I might have to put in, is still really, really good. And if you want to know about the house rule, it's basically the investment house kind of needs to say limit 1 per person, otherwise people can run away with that strategy. But like I said, it's a small niggle. But with this game though, it's just wonderfully thematic. It looks gorgeous on the table, and even though I know nothing about fashion, I mean, case in point, I just dress for comfort.
No.
You know, it just does such a good job of representing the fashion theme. You are in several rounds putting your workers on the board and resolving locations to grab designs, contracts, buildings, employees to build up your fashion company, but you're preparing for a quarterly show that takes place where you are getting this collection together, like all of a certain style of color. You're getting the materials in order to do it. Are you going to buy the cheap stuff or the expensive stuff? Who knows? And when the show starts, you're evaluated based on the criteria of like quality, size of the collection, public relations like social media, and what's the other one? Trendy, how trendy are the clothes? And different shows will have them ranked in different order. You can see ahead of time what they're going to be, so you plan ahead in the long term. But it's cool to have your fashion company build up very different from other players, and it just brings out the immersion factor to high levels. I know nothing about the fashion industry, but I can tell that the theme is strong here. And every time I play this, people are joking about like other people's companies, like whether they've got like cheap manual labor with like rubbish quality of materials, or whether somebody is so obsessed with quality that they are literally making all their clothes out of the finest cuts of rare elk fur.
You know, how many cats can wear boots? Honestly.
Or something stupid like that. It is a bit long, I will admit. You know, it's a heavy economic game, so it does take a good 2.5 to 3 hours to play, hence it is starting to drop a little bit. You know, I need to do that minor house rule, and I have to accept that, oh, this is going to be quite a long affair to play. But for me to like a heavy economic game this much, considering most heavy economic games that are like all to do with trains and shares half the time, you know, I'm not like, bleh, I don't really care. This one, though, is still my favourite heavy economic game, and that's got to be high praise from someone like me if you know my taste in games. So it's dropping a bit, but still my number 10, in my 10 for the year, Predator. My number 7, I can't really put the box up for you because it's got a Calyx shelf pretty much devoted to itself in the other room. It's not even from the list last time. I hadn't played it enough in order to try it out, even though I had the Kickstarter arrive. But this was a fantastic game for me. Yes, it's not for everybody. This is kind of like one of those niche games that only a die-hard cult are going to like. But Edge of Darkness was brilliant for me. This is an evolution of John DeClare's like Mystic Veil card crafting mechanic, where instead of deck building and building a deck, you instead constructed the cards with individual powers in order to construct your like uber card. This takes it up to 11 in terms of the complexity, where now you have worker placement with loads of different locations with different abilities that you can trigger with agents that make the location more powerful or less powerful for you, but all the while you're doing that card construction mechanic in a face-up tableau where you don't have your own personal deck. You'll just have cards that are aligned with your particular house that you're playing, your faction. But other players can take those cards and use them themselves. They gotta pay you to do so, but you might have just created one of the best cards in the game and you're never going to see it for very much because everybody else wants a piece of your card. It's just a really cool interactive Euro game, and there aren't a lot of those around. The fact that this has the level of interaction that it does have is pretty impressive. You've got this ridiculous cube tower that sits at the edge of the table, basically imposing over everything, which is a cube tower mechanic of dropping cubes in to see whether these free adversaries like monsters will come and attack the cities. Have you got the defenses to deal with them? There's so many paths to victory. You've got so many locations, so many scenarios. The replay factor in this game is off the charts, and that's before you throw in any expansions, which I've not even had a chance to play. I've got the Sands of Runestar expansion or whatever it's called. I didn't kickstart the Frost one. I'm regretting it because I wish to have all the content, but I don't need it, to be honest, because there's so much in the base game. It's ridiculous, but it's like one of the most innovative games I've ever played. It just takes several mechanics that have barely been utilized, puts them all together, and creates what for me is just this really interesting, fun game of variety and and card crafting, because the card crafting mechanic is one I really like. It takes one of my favorite mechanics, deck building, and focuses on it in order to do something unique, truly unique. This game just basically took it up to a whole different level. Not for everybody. I don't necessarily say that everybody needs to play this game. I think this is going to be one that the die-hard fans are going to love, me included, but I wouldn't necessarily say for the price point and the complexity level that you should all go out and try and find a copy. This was Kickstarter only. I don't know if AEG Games have any plans to reprint it or do another expansion Kickstarter, but if they do, I'll make you aware of it, okay? Well, they need to make me aware of it first. But yeah, my number 7, like I say, could be higher if it was just a bit easier to sort of get to the table, because it is around a bit of a big box, but really good fun. Edge of Darkness. My number 6 was my number 5, barely any change at all, and yes, people are still gonna either cut off my head or like put me on a plinth somewhere for whether they like or dislike Wingspan, because at the moment you either love it or it's cool to suddenly dislike it. But for me, I love it. It's a great family weight, well I say family weight, gamer family weight. I certainly wouldn't want to teach my parents this, despite my dad being a Bird fan, but it's just a really good smooth Euro game. Yes, there's a bit of luck of the draw with the cards, but it's a 60-minute Euro game. It's allowed to have a little bit of luck involved. Come on, people. And even then, I've even tweaked it slightly with a house rule that with the starting setup, you have the ability to mulligan your starting hand by discarding and redrawing cards so that you can tailor your starting setup a little bit better. That's an easy fix, easy one to put in. But even without that, even if nobody wanted to tweak it, I love the game anyway. It looks gorgeous. It's got a different theme that is, granted it's not dripping in that theme, but the fact that you've got all these cool looking birds around with the eggs and everything, it just brings it out nicely. It looks beautiful and plays smoothly. You've got lots of different bird powers and different paths to victory to experiment with. It's a very tactical game. The solo autumner mode is really, really good in this. It's one of the best autumners out there, but with the expansion thrown in, you've got even more birds and even more powers, and I look forward to putting Oceania in this so that I can see whether that's a necessary expansion or maybe too much bloat. We'll have to see, but I don't think I'll be getting my copy until probably before Christmas if I'm lucky, depending on delivery postage rates at the moment, but I certainly look forward to getting it soon, and I'm not necessarily going to be doing a full review on it, but I'll probably talk about it in a podcast, like where I sort of talk about small expansions there. But yeah, love the game. It does the job for me. Friends of mine love it. They have bought it based on me showing it to them. So whether it's my copy or their copy, I don't care. If they want to play it, and preferably with only 4 players if everyone knows what they're doing, I will say, but 3-player, 2-player, solo, glad to pull this one out. It's still a hit for me. Wingspan. Now, small confession here, I kind of forgot to talk about my number 5 when I was doing this list before. I somehow got confused when I said that Wingspan was my number 5 last year, so I thought I'd already talked about my number 5 and went straight on to my number 4.
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Oops. So continuity-wise, you're going to notice a little bit of difference, but oh well, don't let that be a knock on this game, because On the Underground is still a fantastic game. It was my number 7 before, it's now gone up to number 5. I'm just enjoying it more and more as I play it. Providing I cap the player count at 3, I must admit, 4 more players is a little bit too chaotic. But this is a great reprint of a game where you are trying to lay tracks in this metro system, like the London Metro, or in this case the Berlin one as well. They added a new map. And what you're doing is that you've got this lazy passenger who wants to go around all the different stops, and you're trying to get the passenger to use your networks. But the passenger will take whatever route necessary to avoid walking. So the minimum amount of walking possible, they'll use your line. Even if it goes around the world several times, they'll still do it because they're that lazy. Although, considering some of the meeples in this game involve somebody in a wheelchair and an old guy with a cane, I don't think lazy is the word I would use for some of these passengers, but I digress. But it's a very simple game. I can teach you the rules to this in about 5 minutes, because it's pretty much Ticket to Ride levels of rules here. It's like not complex at all. But there's a lot of depth here where you've got to figure out where that passenger is going to go, what route they'll take, whether you should concentrate on using the passenger this round, or maybe just say, you know what, let the passenger do what they want to do. I'm just going to build and get these points from connecting routes to the edge down here, or connecting these landmarks, or maybe I'll build up this network for the future because I know the passenger's going to go over there at some point, so you can have your fun there, but when you come to there, I'm going to be the king. And it's just stuff like that that comes through with this game. Not to mention that Ludi Creations did a fantastic job of making this look stark and beautiful on the board. Big map, I can clearly see where the connections are, there's no graphic design issues. It is a beautiful game to look at. And then, why has it gone up for me? Well, A, I'm just enjoying it more and more as I try out the different 2 maps. Very impatient for more maps to come out of this. Come on, Ludi Creations, hurry up. But I also checked out the solo mode. It's a separate module you buy from Ludi Creations themselves, costs less than €10, I think. And I think David Turksey had a hand in it as well, so people will recognize him as a solo game designer. And the idea is that this little module has 2 networks built up by the opponent already, and you have to build your networks around them in order to have your point marker overtake the opponent's point marker. But every time the passenger uses their networks, they're getting points. So you've got to try and do better than they do, whilst also trying to think, well, they've already got this network established. I need to try and steal the passenger as often as I can. Really simple setup. I mean, it is very similar to the multiplayer experience in terms of its rule complexity, and it's a very easy setup. 2 cards, build their networks, go. Nice and straightforward. It's a really cool solo mode, and it has elevated my position. In fact, go check out my All By Myself video where I've actually played through the solo mode of this game. You can watch me do a full playthrough. It's not had a lot of views at the moment for some reason. I would love more people to see it, but if you want to see the solo mode in action, go check it out. But I really do enjoy this one. It's great. We're going to get, what, like a New York map, I think a Paris map. You could make as many map packs for this as you like, and I will happily play it. This one, I never got to play its original version, which I think came out like 2006. That was quite a long time ago. But this one, I was like, oh yes, come on, be good, be worth it. Was Tom Vassell lying to me? No, he wasn't. Everything he says is true. It's a fun game. It's excellent, but cap it at 3 players. On the Underground, my belated number 5. My number 4 was my number 4. Hasn't changed, it stayed in the exact same position. This kind of like was the year of Portal games for me, I would probably think, considering there's 2 on this list that were big hits for me from them. Empires of the North. This one has almost got to the point where I'm actually considering whether Imperial Settlers needs to stay in my collection or not. The Rise of the Empire expansion didn't really elevate it enough for me to get it to the table as much as I would like after a sort of brief hiatus, shall we say. But Imperial Settlers is still great and still good fun, but this is just really good and much better. It's a solid, like, upgrade from Imperial Settlers where you've still got the different factions and the tableau of cards that you're building up, getting resources and converting them into victory points and sort of trying to use your unique faction in a way that will be more efficient than the other players. But I love here that you have no deck building in it. And when I say deck building, I'm talking about like pre-built deck construction, not deck building within the game. Here you simply just take the deck, it's your faction, your thing, it's unique to you, it's pretty easy to learn how to use it with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions which are a bit more advanced, but you know, whatever your faction is doing is going to feel very different from what the opponent's faction is doing. But even if you don't play it multiplayer, I tend to play this more solo than anything else, and it's got a really cool solo mode in it where you've got different scenarios and you've got a target to meet as well as some other different events that can take place. But playing as 2 or 3 player is still good fun. You know, the turns are pretty quick. You know, you take an action and that's it. Next player, action until everybody passes. You've got the worker bit in the, well, not worker, the rondelle in the middle where you select an action, but you can potentially flip it to do more actions, and obviously that's going to influence your turn. I just love the variety in this game. I mean, there's so many factions for it now. The base set already had a fair amount of factions, but then you got the Japanese, then you got the the Romans, then you got the barbarians. I think they're going to do Egyptians next, which kind of defeats the purpose of it being called of the North. I think we've already made that joke. But it's just a really good fun tableau engine builder game. One of my favorites in the entire lineup of tableau engine builder games. As I say, it's almost kicking Imperial Settlers out of my collection. I own a ton of that, but they are different enough that you could own both. But I gotta admit, this is the one that hits the table more. This was a 10 out of 10 for me. It still is a 10 out of 10 for me. It's a fantastic game and definitely one to try. My number 3 was my number 2, so it's come down a tiny bit, but come on. 2 to 3, who cares? It's still amazing, it's still 10 out of 10, it is Marvel Champions. This is like a new hit LCG for me. Not quite as good as the Arkham Horror and Lord of the Rings for me currently, but you know, the gap is closing, I must admit. This thing mainly just needed more content, because I played it more in its infancy where it was really solid and I loved it for the year, but I kind of needed more villains, I needed a few more heroes. Since then they brought out a lot of really good fun heroes, like there are no dud heroes in the entire set. But with the Rise of the Red Skull expansion, we've now got a lot more villains, and we've had Kang since, and we're going to get Guardians of the Galaxy soon. We've had Ant-Man, who was really cool. Who's the next one? I forget who the next one is. Who's the next hero? I forget, but whatever. Like I say, there's a lot of content for this game, and they just keep coming out and out. I think it's Quicksilver, actually, but whatever. This game is just great fun. If you are a Marvel fan like me, this will bring out that Marvel theme nicely, because all the heroes will feel very different to play and cater for their individual traits. Ant-Man can constantly go from human to tiny to giant and has a different role each time. Black Widow is more about preparing for what the encounter throws at you. Captain America is very good at the whole block and stunning, you know, and dealing with an adversary one-on-one. The Hulk literally can't do anything about a villain's scheme, but he will punch the living whatever out of you. Someone's about to say something nasty there.
John Spartan, you are fined 1 credit for violation of the verbal morality statute.
You know, in order to get through the mission. It's just such an entertaining game, and for all the LCGs, it's probably one of the simplest ones to play. Yeah, there's a few rules you've got to kind of remember a bit from the rulebook, particularly in terms of what order everything goes in. But in terms of the rule set, it's a pretty straightforward LCG, especially compared to Arkham and Lord of the Rings, and don't get me started on Legend of the Five Rings. Blimey, that was a complicated one. But it's really good, really enjoyable. Yes, it's come down by one place. Whoop-de-doo. It's still one that is in my collection. I love playing it, and as they bring out more and more content, it's possibly going to get better and better for me. I like playing this solo, I like playing it two-handed. 3 and 4 if we're doing a multiplayer game, but two-handed is good fun. You can have like the Hulk, big monster, who's like beating people up, along with someone like say Black Widow, who's probably better at 14 schemes. You know, you could have the two in tandem. There's a lot of cool combinations. There's some that I really want to play, just haven't had the time to, but I'm excited to play more of it, and that's the sort of game that gets into my top 3 of a year and is a 10 out of 10 rating for me. Marvel Champions, if you're a Marvel fan, play it. So why did Marvel Champions go from 2 to 3? Well, because this one went from 3 to 2. Terramara. Terramara is a heavy Euro game, and people were shocked enough that I put this high up on the list last time because they thought, I've not even heard of this Euro. When did this come out? And even then, why do I like it? Well, it came out at Essen. It didn't get a huge amount of buzz, I admit. This is definitely more of a kind of niche Euro game, I would say, for a fair few people. But I fell in love with it after I played it at Essen, and since then my friends have liked it, and I just am excited to play it more often. Granted, the one caveat I have against this game is that it's much better at the 4-player count than it is at 2 and 3 because of the way the neutral player system works. But that small niggle aside, this is just a really good fun resource management Euro game. It looks beautiful. Michael Menzel did the artwork for this and it shows. Anytime you get Michael Menzel to do your boards, it's gonna look good. Really good. But this one is it doesn't necessarily bring too much new to the table. It's resource management. Get resources. These can be upgraded into better resources. So like stone can, wood become timber, for example. And you use these to move yourself up 3 different tracks, the caravan, the water, and the military, as well as buy artifact cards that get you points and special abilities and various other cool stuff on top. It's there's a strategy to it, but it's also quite tactical in how what cards appear that you're going to buy and what actions you're going to go for. It's worker placement. You've got a ton of spaces, but here's the twist, and one I really like. Here, you start off at the start, but all the spaces are open to you. You can go to any space you like. But the further down the board you go, the longer you have to wait through the game for your worker to come back available to you. The actions get better and better as you go further down, so it might be the acceleration that you need, but you're going to have to accept that if I go all the way down there, it's going to be at least another 2-3 rounds before that worker comes back. I might have to just do without him for a bit. But I really want those resources, and so took my space. It just allows for some really cool kind of tactical decisions from that perspective, because then people have different workers at different times. But on top of that, I love it that as you progress through the rounds, the tiles, because it's a modular board effectively, so all the action spaces are different every single game, great. You effectively flip the tiles over so that you end up with a new scoring opportunity on one side, but also a big action space that everybody can go to on the other, which is dependent on how far your caravan is moved. What spaces you can go to is dependent on your military track, how high are you? And then what cards you're allowed to select to buy is based on how far you got up against the river. Multiple ways to play, variable setup, looks gorgeous, smooth. Granted, the rules for the neutral player are a bit of a negative, hence, like I say, best played at 4 players. It's not going to be a short game by any means, it's a heavy game, but it just, for a resource management game, it just seems to tick a lot of the boxes that I like in Euro games. A new innovative concept, decent amount of resources, different paths to victory, nothing too overly complex, a reasonable amount of tension for turns, in what people are doing on the action spaces. It just really surprised me about how much I like this one, and I was kind of sad to see that some people weren't liking it as much, or it wasn't getting much buzz, because compared to a lot of heavy Euro games that people keep going on about, come on, I'd rather play this. You can go on about Brass Birmingham all you like, I'm sorry. This is the heavy Euro game I want to play, but, to each their own. It was my number 3, it's now my number 2. I think it was a top 10 of the all-time in my top 100. Maybe it would have probably fallen out of that spot by now, but like I say, things change. But for the year, this was just really solid. My favourite Euro game of 2019, Terramara. And for number 1, twice in a row, cue the music! Oh wait, I can't, YouTube copyright claim. But whatever. This is Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle-earth, and you can see that is the expansion box. I finally got a copy! Yes, I was late to the party when it first came out, and Fantasy Flight really need to start sorting out their stock issues. But, you know, finally I was able to get a copy when it came back into print. And it didn't disappoint.
Salted pork.
You know, it's a new campaign, it's got another DLC campaign on top, so just when I thought, you know, I've finished 2 campaigns already, I need a bit more content, by the time I got hold of this, I now have 2 more campaigns to do with branching paths and different enemies to fight. Yes, this one annoyingly brings spiders into the mix, so now I have to pick up these horrible little spider minis. I don't like them. Ugh, hate spiders. But, you know, at least it's fulfilling to kill them when I'm playing the game, that is. You know, it's like, big spider turns up in this game and I'm like, what's the objective? We've only got a couple of turns to finish this objective. I don't care, that thing dies, okay? I'm like desperate to kill the thing. But this is a great thematic story-driven game. You know, I already loved it before with the previous campaigns. It's getting better and better over time as the campaigns are improving based on Fantasy Flight taking feedback from players on the first couple of campaigns, which are not bad by any means. They're just getting better. This expansion takes you into like the mines of Moria and more Mirkwood, hence the spiders, but the DLC campaign deals with Dale and ghosts and stuff, and it's just a really cool new set of content that you've got. But the game itself is just great fun. I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, it brings out the theme really well. I put on some backing music, either from the app or just on Spotify with some Lord of the Rings soundtrack, and I'm immersed. I play it two-handed, you can play it multiplayer fine, but if you're playing it solo, you do ideally need to control 2 or 3 people at a time. But I like the deck construction thing that you do in this. You've got the deck set up, and depending which class and character you pick, you'll have a different combination of cards, and I like that you can mix and match and try out different combinations. But you can add stuff to your deck with experience, but the idea that the successes that you do for tests are based on the cards in your deck, so you might tailor it with really cool cards, but then it's like, oh, they don't have much in the way of successes on them. Is it going to be hard to pass tests? You can prep certain things ahead of time. You're obviously trying to like rush against the mission. And then one minor negative I have with the game is that it is a bit on the difficult side if you play this on normal mode. But they have brought out an adventure mode where you can basically elongate the timer that the game sets for you so you can explore a bit more of the content. I tend to play it on normal mode, gauge it for myself, and then if I think that was too hard, I'll play it on adventure mode. But adventure mode is not necessarily like, oh, this is painstakingly easy, there's no challenge whatsoever. No, there'll still be a challenge, but at least you'll get to explore a lot more of the interesting stuff that the map has rather than feeling you've got to book it for the exit. But I still really enjoy this. I just get this is what gives me my Lord of the Rings kick. For the most part, from a thematic perspective, I do love the Lord of the Rings LCG, don't get me wrong, but if I'm talking which one brings out the theme of Lord of the Rings a bit more, it's this one, hands down. But it was my number 1 last year, it's still my number 1. Maybe it would have come down a tiny bit had the extra content not been made available to me, but thankfully it has. I've been playing through it, and it's still great. I can't wait to continue the campaign. I haven't finished it fully yet, but I can't wait for the moment when I've got some time, probably before Christmas when I finish work. I've got 5 days of work as I record this. As soon as that's done, I'm going to play some more solo games before I go home to visit the parents, and this one will be included. Yes, I love it to bits. My number 1. Whew. I've done 2 top 10 lists today, recording-wise. Yeah, my throat is a little bit gone at this point. But, as I say, you are going to see this list and the top 10 of 2020, which was a much harder list to put together in terms of actually finding 10 good games. This one was a much harder list to put together in the terms of that there was lots of good games that I'd played, and suddenly it's like, oh, I need to really hound these down, like narrow these down to 10. This was definitely a better year than 2020 by far. So without further ado, if you like these games, then by all means let me know. If you don't, then let me know. If you want other suggestions for 2019, then by all means pop them in the comments so that people can see and come up with their own implications for what they thought were their top 10s of 2019. But assuming that this video comes out before Christmas, I'll just say that whatever you decide to do because of COVID, just enjoy your Christmas break. You know, whether you stay at home and just keep to yourselves but have a relaxing time, that's cool. If you decide to go home and visit the parents, that's cool. That's what I intend to do. I'm going to go home to Somerset and visit them. But even if you're a content creator, just take a break. You know, I'm going to be chilling over Christmas. I'm going to set a time where You know, I will not be producing any more video content. I mean, I may still upload it in a sense, but other than a live stream, maybe, I will basically be switching the cameras off and all that and going, you know what, from this date until January, I need to take 5 and just chill for a bit. And like I say, that will hopefully calm me down from how work is crunching me at the moment and how much content I've had to put out lately. You know, these reviews and top 10s I'm doing, and that's short jobs, put it that way. But I look forward to more stuff in the new year. We're going to be doing collaborations with people like Board Game Ramblings and other channels with the StreamYard thing that I was using for my last live stream. We're going to be doing like collaborative top 10 lists live on stream. That'll be really cool. You know, so there's going to be some cool stuff to look forward to in Jan. But until then, I hope you enjoy your Christmas break, and you know, I'll be seeing you hopefully very soon with hopefully a more positive outlook in 2021.